biosimilar user fees. Okay, we will briefly provide some background on the Biosimilar User Fee Amendments of 2017. What is a biological product? What is a biosimilar? Describe the fee structure and different types of fees. Describe waivers and refunds. Sorry, it's a little slow. Explain what happens when fees are not paid, and to also provide you with some reminders and resources. So, a bit of background. It was with the Biologic Price Competition and Innovation Act where, in March 2010, where the Public Health Service Act was amended to allow for an abbreviated pathway. So this is known as the 351K pathway for biological products shown to be biosimilar or interchangeable with an FDA licensed reference product. Now, fees didn't come into play until the Food and Drug Safety and Innovation Act. So this is where we have the Biosimilar User Fee Act of 2012, which authorizes FDA to collect fees for biosimilar products. Since this was a new program and so there's no historical data, the fees under BsUFA I was dependent on the prescription drug user fees. So now with the Food and Drug Administration Reauthorization Act, which was signed into law in August 2017, we have BsUFA II, which authorizes FDA to collect fees for biosimilar products from fiscal year 2018 through fiscal year 2022. Now, under BsUFA II, we now have an independent fee structure, so fees are no longer dependent on the PDUFA fees. Now, before we go into the fee structure, it might be important to understand what is a biological product. So there are large, complex molecules, generally of high molecular weight, made from human or animal materials. So this could include vaccines, blood, tissues, proteins, proteins with greater than 40 amino acids. So what is a biosimilar? A biosimilar is a biological product that is highly similar or interchangeable to a U.S. licensed reference biological product. So for a biological product to be considered biosimilar, it should be highly similar to the reference product, notwithstanding minor differences in clinically inactive components. And there's no clinically meaningful differences between the biological product and the reference product in terms of safety, purity, and potency of the product. Now, for it to be interchangeable, the biological product may be substituted for the reference product without the intervention of a healthcare provider. So the safety and risk of alternating or switching is not greater than with the repeated use of the reference product without alternating and switching. Now, the fee structure under BsUFA can be broken down into 3 phases. The first is the Biosimilar Biological Product Development Program, known as the BPD program. So this is the pre-IND, IND phase of developing the biosimilar product. And there are 3 types of fees. You have the initial BPD fee, the annual BPD fee, and a reactivation fee. Now, I'll explain these fees in the next few slides. But once a sponsor is ready to submit their application, then you have the application fee. And then when the application is approved is when program fees come into play, and this is the marketing phase. Now, before we delve into the types of fees, I just want to point out that the fees are published annually in the Federal Register, usually by August 1st. And for fiscal year 2019, the target revenue is $38.8 million. Now, keep in mind that the program is still in its infancy, so there's no specific percentage that we receive for each type of fee as with the PDUFA. So the percentages will vary each year as the program grows. But for this year, we anticipate that 42% of the target revenue will come from the BPD fees, 40% from the application fees, and 18% from the program fees. Now, what is an initial BPD fee? This is a one-time fee to join the BPD program for a biosimilar product in development. It is triggered by an IND submission or a BPD meeting request that is granted, so whichever of the two occurs first. With a BPD meeting, this allows the sponsor to get advice from FDA on the development of their product. You can have as many meetings with FDA as needed, and the type of meeting request depends on what advice is needed, you would need from FDA. There are BPD types 1, 2, 3, or 4 meeting requests. I have provided a link at the bottom that explains the different types of meetings that you can request. Now, when are the fees due? If it's an initial advisory meeting, then there is no fee. But if it's a BPD type 1, 2, 3, or 4 meeting request, then the fee is due not later than 5 calendar days after the meeting request is granted. This could be either verbally or in writing. But keep in mind that the 5-day clock is crucial, because if the payment is not received within the time frame, then the meeting could be canceled and may have to be rescheduled. When we know that a meeting is going to be granted, we do give sponsors a heads-up call so that they can kind of get the process to start rolling. Because we do understand the 5 days, calendar days, can be a bit tight, particularly if it falls on a weekend. And also that wire transfers from foreign companies may take up to 5 days to reach FDA. And then if it is an IND submission, then the fee is due at the time of submission. So what is an annual BPD fee? This is an annual fee owed by the sponsor who are in the BPD program. So once the sponsor pays the initial BPD fee for a product, then that sponsor's annual BPD fee obligation begins in the next fiscal year. So it is one fee per pre-IND IND. The FDA, we issue invoices to sponsors in August ahead of the new fiscal year, with payment due at the beginning of the fiscal year. Now, our fiscal year runs from October 1 to September 30. So for this upcoming fiscal year 2020, it would be October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2020. And we will be issuing our fiscal year 2020 invoices this August. Now, because FDA issues invoices ahead of the fiscal year, we don't have the complete data as of October 1st. So therefore, we do issue another round of invoices in December to capture those sponsors that entered the BPD program in August and September, just before the new fiscal year begins. So for example, if a sponsor pays the fiscal year 2019 initial BPD fee in August 2019, the sponsor can expect to receive a fiscal year 2020 annual BPD invoice in December 2019. There are exceptions to the annual BPD fee obligation. The first is if a sponsor discontinues participation in the BPD program. If there is no IND submission, then a formal written request must be made to FDA indicating that they have no intention of further developing the product as a biosimilar. If it is an IND submission, then the sponsor must withdraw the IND in accordance with Part 312 of Title 21 of the CFR. This must be done not later than August 1st prior to the new fiscal year for it to be effective on October 1st. This is a very important date because if the request is received after that date, then the sponsor can expect to receive an annual BPD fee invoice for the next fiscal year. And the other exception to the annual BPD fee is when a sponsor submits a marketing application that is accepted for filing. Now, once a sponsor has discontinued participation from the BPD program for the development of a biosimilar product, and then later wishes to re-engage with FDA in developing the product as a biosimilar, then the sponsor must pay a reactivation fee. Keep in mind the reactivation fee is twice the initial BPD fee. The process is the same as for the initial BPD fee, so the fee is triggered by a BPD meeting request that is granted, in which the fee would be due 5 calendar days after the meeting request is granted. Or it is triggered by the IND submission, for which the fee would be due at the time of the submission. Once the reactivation fee is paid, then the annual BPD fee obligation resumes in the next fiscal year. Now, when a sponsor submits a 351K application, if clinical data other than comparative bioavailability data with respect to safety or effectiveness are required for approval, then a full application fee is required at the time of submission. If clinical data other than comparative bioavailability data studies with respect to safety or effectiveness are not required for approval, then only a half application fee would be paid at the time of the submission. Now, FDA may take up to 60 days to determine whether the application is acceptable for filing. So if the application is accepted for filing, then the sponsor is no longer in the BPD program for the corresponding IND. And so then the annual BPD fee obligation ends for that product. Now, if the application is refused for filing or withdrawn before filing, a refund of 75% of the fee shall be returned to the applicant. But in that case, the sponsor still remains in the BPD program, and the annual BPD fee obligation continues until the application is resubmitted and filed by the FDA. Now, program fee comes into play once the application is approved. The fee is assessed annually for each product that is identified in an application as of October 1st of each fiscal year, and it does not appear in the discontinued section of the Therapeutic Biosimilar Biological Product List. And I will briefly talk about that list in the next slide. A firm is invoiced a maximum of 5 program fees per application. So if there are 7 different strengths that are approved in an application, the firm would be invoiced for 5 program fees. And just like with the annual BPD fees, FDA invoices in August and December of each fiscal year. With the August invoice, payment is due on October 1st, and with the December invoice, payment is due in January. Now, FDA maintains a list of billable biosimilar products. So this list contains all user fee eligible and discontinued or not marketed products. So this is similar to PDUFA's Orange Book and their billable list. There is a purple book out there, but please note that for our billing purposes, we do not use the purple book. Our billing is based off of this therapeutic biosimilar list. And we do ask that you review this list regularly, as this will help us ensure that the products are listed correctly. This list is available on the BsUFA website under Related Info. And in reviewing this list, you may find that you have a new strength that was approved, it's not yet listed, or you have a product that you are not marketing, and so you need to move it to the discontinued section. So we ask that you please notify of any changes to this list. As mentioned before, a product that is approved and not listed in the discontinued section of this list will be invoiced for program fees. So the deadline to make those changes is December 30th of each year. Because come October 1st, if you're listed in the active section, then a program fee would be owed for the product for that fiscal year. This slide is to give you a timeline of our invoicing process. We send out correspondences in June notifying firms of the upcoming fiscal year invoicing. This correspondence is sent to those who will be receiving an invoice. So if you receive one and we have just sent it out last week. We ask that you respond with updated contact information and verify that what we have on record is correct. August 1st is the deadline to submit the request to discontinue from the BPD program if you no longer plan to pursue development of the product as a biosimilar. And then FDA will send invoices by mid to late August with payment due on October 1st. September 30th would be the deadline to move an approved biosimilar product to the discontinued list if you are not marketing the product in the next fiscal year. And then we will again send invoices in December for those BPD programs or fee-liable biosimilar products that were not invoiced in August. And those payments will be due in January. Now on to waivers and refunds. Unlike PDUFA, BsUFA only has one waiver, and that is the small business waiver for an application fee. There are 3 criteria that the applicant must meet. The first is the applicant, including its affiliates, employs fewer than 500 employees. The second criteria is that the applicant does not have a drug product that has been approved under a human drug application or a biosimilar application and introduced or delivered into interstate commerce. Now, I want to stress that this criteria is slightly different under PDUFA. So under PDUFA, the applicant cannot have a drug product approved under a human drug application. However, under BsUFA, you cannot have a drug product approved under a human drug or a biosimilar application. So this is the major distinction between the PDUFA small business waiver and the BsUFA small business waiver. And then the third criteria is that the applicant and its affiliates should be submitting its first biosimilar application. To request a small business waiver, we ask that you complete the small business waiver refund request, which is Form FDA 3971, and to submit it at least 4 months prior to the submission of the biosimilar application to CDER collections at fda.gov. Please note that the waiver expires after 1 year, so if a waiver is granted but you are unable to submit the application within a year, you may need to resubmit the request. Now, if you are ready to submit your application and the small business waiver is pending, you can either wait for the small business waiver decision to submit your application, or you can go ahead and submit the application, but you would have to pay the application fee. Now, if the application fee is not paid, then the application will not be received. If the waiver is granted, then the applicant can receive a refund of the paid fee. There are not many opportunities for a refund under BsUFA. So there are no refunds for initial BPD fee and a reactivation fee. Refunds may be requested for an annual BPD fee, application fee, and a program fee. Now, I want to kind of talk about the annual BPD fee refund because that's kind of unique. Because the only situation a sponsor can receive a refund of the annual BPD fee is when a sponsor submits an application before the new fiscal year, pays the annual BPD fee for that new fiscal year, and the application is filed in the new fiscal year. So I'll give you an example. So a sponsor receives an annual BPD fee invoice for which a fee is due on October 1st. The sponsor pays the invoice for the IND and then submits an application for that IND in September. The FDA doesn't file the application until November in the new fiscal year. So in this situation, the sponsor can request a refund of the annual BPD fee that was paid for that product. But otherwise, there's usually no refund of annual BPD fees. For waivers and refunds, we request a formal written request should be submitted not later than 100 days after the fee is due. For refund requests, please submit Form FDA 3913, User Fee Payment Refund Request. And this can be submitted to CDER collections at fda.hhs.gov. Now, what can go wrong if you don't pay the required fees? Failure to pay BPD fees will result in BPD meetings related to the product that could be canceled. no receipt of an IND application, or the sponsor can go on financial hold for the product. And then there's no acceptance of any biosimilar applications or supplements. Now, failure to pay application and program fees will result in no acceptance of any biosimilar applications or supplements. So it's important that you pay the appropriate fees. This slide just lists some important reminders. August 1st, as I mentioned, is the deadline to discontinue participation from the BPD program, because once this date is passed, then you can expect an annual BPD fee invoice. September 30th is the deadline to move an approved biosimilar product to the discontinued list. October 1st is when invoice payments are due. And to just keep in mind about the 180-day calendar rule for refunds and waiver requests. This is just to provide some additional resources. We have a guidance assessing user fees under the Biosimilar User Fee Amendments of 2017. So this explains the different types of fees and what our process is in terms of submitting requests. We also have the Therapeutic Biosimilar Biological Product List, which I mentioned is listed on the BsUFA website under Related Info, and this contains all the user fee eligible and discontinued or not marketed products. And this is the list that we used for billing purposes. And both of these are all listed on our BsUFA website, which can provide very important information. This is our contact information. Any questions can be directed to CDER Collections, or you can reach us at 301-796-7900. And we have a challenge question. So a sponsor pays the initial BPD fee on September 28, 2019 and enters the BPD program. Does the sponsor owe a fiscal year 2020 annual BPD fee? So the answer to that would be yes. The sponsor paid the fiscal year 2019 initial BPD fee on September 28th, so that means that the annual BPD fee obligation begins in the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2020. So the sponsor can expect to receive an invoice for the fiscal year 2020 annual BPD fee in December 2019. So this wraps up my presentation on BsUFA. We will have a short break, and then we'll be back for Q&A.